Welcome to another episode of the Tour on Air podcast. And today I'm joined by Ian Lee from Syndicate.io, co-founder and CEO. Really excited to be talking to you today. You are building the future of Web3 native investing DAOs. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just to clarify, actually, I'm not the CEO. We don't use those titles as a Web3 company. So I'm just one of the two co-founders along with Will Papper. And it's been really exciting to work in the space for so long on things that we really care about.
Good to dust off those titles. Agreed. So tell us a little bit about, how did you get to build, Syndicate? You were at IDEO before, which is, obviously, a huge design, consultancy, but by now I think has many other branches as well, right? And you were running the crypto venture. Was it a fund or incubator?
Yeah, so I guess going all the way back, like I got into crypto in 2014 when I was at Citigroup and its venture arm, Citi Ventures. And I became the head of crypto and blockchain there at the bank for 3 years. Now, it was during that time in 2015 that I met a team at IDEO that was similarly starting to research the future applications of blockchains and crypto technologies. And so I helped them start that division in 2015. I then joined it in 2017 full-time after leaving Citi Ventures. And shortly after, about 6 months into it, we spun a venture capital fund focused on crypto and Web3 investments out of IDEO, but it was backed by IDEO. And actually we're all IDEO people. We were integrated into IDEO. So we actually sat in IDEO studios in San Francisco and in different places around the world, and incubated and invested in companies in the Web3 and crypto space since 2017. Even though we had been working with crypto startups and founders since 2015, including like Open Zeppelin and Decentraland way back in the day. So I was one of the managing partners of that crypto venture fund, and it's still going to this day. I'm still a part of it as a venture partner. So it's now on Fund 2. We'll probably be moving on to Fund 3 pretty soon, and is invested in probably over 100 to 150 startups at this point in time.
Including, of course, Syndicate.io, and congratulations to, all the different rounds that you've done. They were very community oriented. Reminded me of my first round with our festival, where we also gathered like 40 unicorn founders of the European kind of tech landscape, and a bunch of ecosystem players. You certainly topped that. Over 100 investors, basically the who is who of the Web3 world.
Yeah, I think at this point we probably have over 350, which is a bit of a nightmare in terms of the cap table. But the reason that we did it is because, if you really think about what Web3 technologies and networks are trying to do is they're trying to be owned by the internet and owned by as many people, whether they are users, co-operators, co-developers of these networks as possible. And so, we also live in the real world, right? Where startups, to this day still need to go through traditional funding processes for the most part to get off the ground and get enough funding to do what they need to do, and we're not any different in that regard. But I think that the way we think about how we raise capital is we're trying to, as best as possible, approximate what the actual intent of a Web3 technology, a Web3 company, and a Web3 network wants to become, which is community owned. And so at every step along the way, as you mentioned, like from our seed round, which was led by IDEO in January of 2021, but it had like 9 funds and 18 angels involved. We then did a community raise a couple months after that with 100 founders in Web3 involved in that, to really diversify kind of the number of people that were and communities by extension that were involved in our project. Our Series A, which was led by Andreessen Horowitz, had actually over 150 other funds and founders and operators and creatives involved in that.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
gotta mention
Snoop
the dog.
Dogg and yeah, Snoop Dogg and some other more well-known personalities. I guess I would say, and it wasn't about like, I mean, obviously they have very well-known names, but the point of actually bringing folks like that
Mm,
into Syndicate was much more intentional than maybe people realize, which was like folks like Snoop Dogg, but many other people that
mm,
were involved in it with lesser known names. They actually represent communities that we are trying to reach out to and trying to
mhm,
connect with and trying to bring into this project because what we're trying to do is really reimagine and reinvent how the world invests
mhm,
resources and capital. And that doesn't just apply to VCs. I mean, that applies to literally any community on the planet, whether it's investing in philanthropy, investing in art, investing in musicians, creatives, other kinds of things. And so that's why we've been trying to reach more and more communities, diversified communities as possible. And where I think that came to, its most recent evolution is that about a month and a half ago or so, we announced that we had raised $6 million of strategic capital, which isn't a lot of money. But the point of it was that there were more than 50 companies in the areas of like fintech and also in crypto, like, for example, Carta from the fintech world, but also OpenSea,
mhm,
Uniswap, Circle, Ledger, so on and so forth. But also it included DAOs and other communities like nonprofits and some foundations that were involved that really, again, diversify and try to and are intended to represent the network that we're ultimately trying to build and co-operate together. So yeah, at every step along the way, we've been doing this. And we actually think that that's like where the world's going, which is like, you know, yes, like traditional forms of investors or capital, like VCs and others, makes sense. But it also makes sense to try to raise from your community and raise from your users because, you know, in the end, that's who these networks and these technologies are ultimately trying to serve.
And before we talk a little bit more about, why I certainly also think that is needed in, the world of investing, let's maybe just very briefly, so, the listeners have an idea of what the actual product does, talk about kind of like the basic functionality that you have live at the moment. And I'm really in awe, I must say, about, the simplicity, of the product and the design and kind of user experience. Basically anybody, and correct me, you probably have the better pitch, but from my experience, anybody can connect a wallet and basically invite other people and create what you call the so-called investment club of people that are all basically actively participating in jointly investing into another company or product, crypto project. And you basically provide the infrastructure to do so, but it also includes, I think, reporting already, right? After.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
Yep.
among a number of other things as well. Yeah, I mean that nicely encapsulates what our first product is, which is, as you mentioned, what we call investment clubs on Syndicate that run on Ethereum effectively and other chains in the near future. What it means is that, yeah, as you mentioned, any group of people, whether you are professional investors, we have a lot of those where they're often like angel investment groups that have been investing for sometimes decades together, or they're actually just groups of friends in the real world oftentimes. So we have like basically people that turn their group chats into a DAO on Syndicate to invest in things that they care about. We also have like groups like this one called Symmetrical, which shout out to them, and many others like that. There are actually a lot of groups that were formed out of student organizations across the world from different universities, where they're actually like student clubs in a way, where they're trying to learn together about Web3 or investing generally, and they're forming an investment club on Syndicate to really like help educate and learn together and invest together, which is really exciting. So we have this really broad spectrum, but effectively what our product does and our infrastructure does is it allows anyone to create one of these natively on the internet and run it natively on the internet with no backend. I mean, because it runs completely on our open source smart contracts. And why that's so powerful is like you can start one of these things in less than 30 seconds with a single Ethereum transaction. Depending on the gas fees on Ethereum mainnet of that day, sometimes the cost of gas for creating one of these DAOs or investment clubs, it can be as low as $17, $15. And you can, establish that within literally, less than a minute. Those tools don't exist in the traditional world, right? If you try and imagine like how you might do this in the traditional world using bank accounts and other fintech solutions, it would be this like crazy patchwork of things that would be really expensive or take weeks to replicate. And so these are some of like the superpowers we believe of Web3, and that's what our first product does. Now, more broadly though, that same infrastructure that powers these investment clubs can be utilized to create many other things and enable many other things beyond just investment clubs. So, for example, this is where some of our more custom work comes in, but like we have venture capital funds that are completely running on chain with no backend for a fraction of the cost on Syndicate, and many other kinds of types of investing vehicles. Obviously, with those things, a lot more compliance infrastructure is often required in order to do that. But they can run on the same infrastructure, which is amazing because what we're looking at here is potentially 1,000 to 10,000x improvement in terms of not only speed and cost, but also capability due to the composability of Web3 and the fact that syndicates on our platform or on our protocol are composable with all the other tools across all of Web3 and Ethereum.
And before we also dive a little deeper there, I'm really intrigued to hear more about that type of product, and also what type of tools you're still missing in the DAO investment space that you would love to be have more composability with. So for all the founders out there, maybe some ideas of what to build next. Now, just once more, let's zoom out. Like so if I think about like this product in the wider, macroeconomic kind of context, right? I see the clear, mission and, noble mission also of, sort of democratizing access, and giving more people, access to the potential upside of, early stage investing, for example, or equity investing, or even like you were saying, art investing, etc. And I think, if we look at, all the past 10, 15 years of asset inflation and how that has benefited, the wealthy and has, actually widened the gap. I do think these products are super important for the future. Devil's advocate me, on the other hand, thinks about like, the kind of, investment landscape, and, would ask myself, the average venture capital fund, doesn't produce returns, that are better than, a traditional index fund, for example, but actually produces poorer returns. And, it seems also what we've seen now in the last maybe 12 to 18 months, with a lot of retail investors, entering the general investment landscape, that, I guess the old school investor types will be like, well, that's always the peak of the bubble, right? When that happens, and then it all comes crashing down, and it's ultimately these retail investors that get hurt the most because they often come in the latest. How do you reconcile this? Like, are these democratic kind of communities that are investing together, how will you be able to maybe also improve the performance that traditionally hasn't been that great for these average kind of, even professional funds out there?
Wow, what a question. Okay, so I'll try and answer this, but you have like a there are a lot of really entangled but really complex topics in your question, which is part of what makes this opportunity so big, but also so complicated. I would say a few things. So you're absolutely right that like the investing world is a lot more complicated than people realize. I mean, I've been a VC for almost a decade, and living through that, like you when you go into the middle of it, you start to realize how complex it is and how entangled it is and how difficult it is actually to like untangle these things, because it's not just about kind of money. It's also about social relationships. It's about the psychology. It's about a whole bunch of issues that may seem unrelated. And so how do you basically reinvent a system that is so complex as this? Well, I think that part of what we believe here is that Web3 as an industry is starting to change fundamentally from the ground up. A lot of the behaviors and patterns that exist in the traditional Web2 world, if you want to call it that. What do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned earlier that like from a first principles perspective, a lot of these Web3 technologies and these Web3 startups want to be fundamentally community owned in the end, right? Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Well, that already in of itself starts to create demand and behaviors like what we do or we've done at Syndicate. Mm-hmm. We're not the only ones where they're increasingly raising from their community, right? Not just kind of traditional investors. And so while it's not like, completely on the opposite end of the spectrum, mm-hmm. like what happened in 2017 around ICOs and stuff like that, where it was like just literally anybody on the internet, it's starting to move, more towards what we think is going to happen is like a degree of balance, where actually like all of these players will play a role, but there will be an increased opportunity and role for non-traditional investors and people, mm-hmm. maybe they're retail or something a little bit different than that, to participate in the investing process. And I think that what does that mean? Well, what that means is that like communities are going to have increased power in the investing world in Web3 over just pure capital. Mm-hmm. And so these communities that are going to form, and we're already starting to see this on Syndicate today, is that these communities either represent certain demographics, certain value sets, certain areas of expertise, mm-hmm. certain networks of relationships that become actually just as valuable as traditional investors. And so with our investment club product, we've had more than 3,000 investment clubs that have launched in the first 4 months since launching that product in late January.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. And what's really exciting about them is like you start to see this hyper specialization. So for example, like we have two DAOs in particular, one called Dow Jones and one called Mori Music, where there are a bunch of people in the music NFT communities. Mm-hmm. And they're really kind of networked and knowledgeable about, that particular area, right? So now think about a music sure. NFT startup, right? And founder. It's like, I'm going to raise $1 million. Who should I take capital from? Who's going to be most helpful to me in my project that ultimately wants to be community owned? It's like, well, should I just raise from traditional investors, or should I make, room and space for Mori Music DAO and Dow Jones? And increasingly, we're starting to see an appetite for that more and more from the founder and the project side. So we're starting to see these communities and these DAOs starting to show up more on cap tables, and more of them like that specialize. There's ones that are focused on designers, ones that are focused on smart contract auditing, ones that are focused on Africa as like a region, mm-hmm. or India and stuff like that. And that I think is starting to speak to what the future of investing will look like, which is actually you're going to see more diversity, more specialization, and you're going to see a lot more, I think, alternative, like non-traditional investors who actually may not be trying to professionally invest for returns. They're just investing because they truly love that community or that project. And just to summarize this, what I mean by this, well, I think one of the really profound ideas here is that it might be better to, like, it might actually generate higher returns if you focus more on the community and the communities that you love and want to contribute to than purely generating financial returns. And so that's where I think there could be a massive paradigm shift. To your earlier question about how retail and a lot of VCs don't outperform the S&P and stuff like that. When you look at a lot of these like community-based groups, like there's this one group in Africa that's all of the African founders that are like the top in the Africa region. I mean, they told me that their investment club over the last year or so has like a 60x return. Like name a VC that has that. That's insane. How is that possible? It's because they are so well known and they're so good at what they do that they get the best deals, or at least get to participate in the best deals alongside other top investors. That is the future of investing. It's not, necessarily as simple as maybe you mentioned, where it's just like anyone can participate and anyone can, be a VC. I mean, there's definitely going to be pathways for that as well. For sure. But it's maybe that's not necessarily like the point.
Yeah, 1KX, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fund, but they just, a few weeks ago had an interesting blog post about this, sort of the unbundling of the VC model with what they called the third iteration of investment DAOs, which is like sort of the service DAO, where, the members of the DAO provide more than just capital, but provide actual value add. And, in a way, like replicating maybe what Andreessen has invented in the traditional VC space, as being kind of this operational VC that has people that actually help their companies and founders on an operational basis. So is this something then for you also where you say, in terms of composability, like you would love to plug into more DAO tooling that allows for that value of members to be unlocked and managed? Or do you already see some of those tools out there that help with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that what has already been happening is that a lot of our investment clubs have, already had from the very beginning or start to build service elements, if you will, around them or adjacent to them. Similarly, the other direction is happening, where a lot of these service DAOs, as people call them, start to invest, and they start to use Syndicate as the infrastructure for that. So these worlds are colliding. What does it mean? Excuse me. What does it mean? Well, investing is not just about investing money. Investing is also about investing time and talent and skill. And so we see ourselves as part of that bigger picture. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that, people in these communities that are investing, whether it's money or other things like services or expertise, they're going to be using a variety of tools to do so. Syndicate is one of those, but as you mentioned, there are many others. I mean, things like, for example, Coordinate, which manages and coordinates sort of participation into different projects and communities, and so many more are doing that. And Syndicate and we and they also are composable with each other. So we have groups that are using Syndicate for investment clubs, but they're also, for example, tracking contributor contributions on Coordinate or some of these other platforms on Web3, and they're linking them in some cases. So it's really exciting, and that's where I think some people, especially from the traditional world, are kind of missing the point that like Web3 actually unlocks not just 1,000x better speed and cost, but actually capability is like, that the kind of I guess composability and interoperability between different systems, that's not possible in the traditional Web2 or fintech world. You can't like easily stitch like, Charles Schwab with like a Brex account, unless you've got like, crazy kind of APIs and development capabilities. Whereas out of the box, you can literally use Syndicate with Snapshot, with Coordinate, with, all these other tools that other people are building. And that's part of, the whole point.
And then let's get back to what you were mentioning. So you also offer at this stage sort of more customized solutions for venture capital firms, for example. And I assume this is basically, I mean, I could imagine, for some people, the idea of an investment club, works, but they are missing this kind of carry and management fee perspective, right? Where they say, maybe me as an organizer of this group of investors, I put in more work. And I want to be remunerated for that. Is that one of the things that you're then offering in these more customized solutions? Is that also something that you're working towards too? So similar to what you see with AngelList and their rolling funds and their traditional angel funds, being able to offer that type of incentive for the so-called leads of these investment clubs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of the institutional users that want to use Syndicate to, for example, to your point, run venture funds or other more traditional investment vehicles on chain on Syndicate. Yeah, like one of the key features of that is the ability to, for example, charge carried interest or things like that. Our kind of infrastructure completely supports that out of the box. But from a compliance perspective, the tools that we built to date are not, customized for that. I mean, there's actually quite a bit of additional requirements that are, needed to actually do those kinds of things, well and above board, right? Including, for example, making the appropriate registrations with, securities exchanges or securities, regulators like the SEC in the US or other places around the world, depending on where that investment vehicle is domiciled, right? So as a result of that, we don't have those tools broadly available currently beyond investment clubs, which are not able to charge performance fees or carry. So in those cases, right, we do some degree of customization, I guess, for these groups that often already have the compliance infrastructure, meaning like they're normal funds that are already out there today. They already have all of the appropriate filings and compliance stack on their side, but what they really want to do is like expand the capability range using our technology. And so we'll at times kind of help them with that. Now, the only other thing that I would say is that a lot of the work is actually through this custom development is actually not for the purpose of just like enabling institutional users to use our infrastructure. The purpose of it is very strategic in the sense that a lot of the things that they're asking for are actually aligned with things that we are developing as part of our broader roadmap. So, a lot of the things that we'll develop for these kind of custom, partners, whatever, are actually early stage incubations that we will eventually roll out to the public. And these are not limited to compliance kind of tools. These are also primarily actually Web3 native investing capabilities that are not possible in the traditional world. That's kind of like what we're really focused on, is like not trying to, a lot of people ask us like, what is a good analogy for Syndicate? Is it like AngelList or some of these other things? And it's not like that. Like the way we think about this is more Syndicate could do to investing what YouTube did to film and TV, which is like the point of it was not about taking movies and putting them on YouTube. I mean, does that happen? Sure. But the point of it was actually like the billions of new content and creators that didn't exist before YouTube that now are creators of content. And in a similar way, right? Like we're trying to create tools that create billions of quote unquote investors that are not investors today and maybe never will think of themselves as investors.
Mm-hmm.
But it's critical that they do become investors in, building the world that we all live in.
Can you already give an example, like what is as part of the roadmap, what you're working on that kind of leverages these type of Web3 capabilities?
Yeah. So, excuse me. Some of the things that we're thinking about are, we know that investment DAOs actually live within broader contexts. So what do I mean by that? Well, pretty early on through our private beta, when we were incubating that product with a number of communities, and especially post-launch, it's become very clear that these investing DAOs that are being created, they live within a broader system. And what does that mean? Well, that system is actually what is coordinating the allocation of resources, whether those resources are financial capital or human capital, across and within these networks. And what I think our view on this is, and has been from the very beginning, is that the future of investing is network driven, actually. We use this phrase often where what's going to happen in the long term is that we're going to move away from capital allocators to capital networks. Now, I know that's kind of very abstract, but what that means is that capital will be allocated via networks, not necessarily people or organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds a little bit like science fiction. I think, again, we are building towards that vision, which will take likely years. But what it also necessarily implies are certain primitives, protocols, products, platforms, and capabilities that can ladder up to that vision. And so we're working on a number of those right now, and have been for months. We've been incubating it with various kind of communities and investors in Web3. They are basically the primitives and some of the, capabilities that will start to form the foundations to unlock that vision that we're ultimately headed towards.
Really exciting. So I guess we have to just wait and see what these will look like, concretely. Let's go once just very nitty gritty. Me as a user, I'll just tell you like one or two questions that I thought of when I was, playing around with the tool. When it comes to kind of on-chain investing, I guess this is where it's really seamless, right? You buy a, already public token as a club, or an NFT, something that you can really just plug your wallet in, go to an exchange and kind of purchase. But you also offer investment into kind of traditional equity, so early stage crypto projects maybe that don't have a token yet, but that are selling equity to investors. How does it look like there? Is that where you feel like at this stage, like what's the advantage of being on chain, also for the venture capital firms that you were mentioning? Can you just walk us through the process of, how that would look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as many crypto investors will know, like a lot of crypto startups and projects these days, when they're raising capital, via equity instruments or safe notes or whatever, a lot of them increasingly accept, for example, USDC as the form of investment as opposed to bank wires. And, there are a number of reasons for that. So we're already starting to see that transition, in the early stage markets. So as a result, when people create these investment clubs or VCs are using our infrastructure to invest, they'll seed it like a normal wallet, just run it as a DAO and then invest on chain using USDC. And the value there is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's the ability to sort of track that stuff, report on that stuff a little bit more easily because of the interfaces and related tooling that we have provided. I think.
So you track. Sorry to interrupt, Ian. Is there already a feature where you track like the development of the valuation, and plug that into reporting? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a capability inside of Syndicate when you launch one of these DAOs or investment clubs, right? Where let's say out of the DAO's underlying wallet or multi-sig, there's like a $200,000 USDC transaction out of the wallet. Now, Syndicate, or frankly, anyone, no one would know what that is, right? They just see an outgoing transaction. So you can actually go into the transaction history on Syndicate for your DAO and reclassify that thing as an investment into a startup. So you can say, like, once you do that, like, oh, this was an investment into Syndicate's Series Seed at this valuation and cost basis and current value, and even like put in notes. And that information that we call an annotation gets stored into that DAO's that DAO's page, which is private to the members of that DAO. So you now will see on the dashboard, the asset or investment portfolio dashboard, you'll see alongside tokens and NFTs, you'll now see off-chain investments into startups via that annotation. So you can now track that stuff, right? So people are using that to track investments in the startups. Some of these DAOs are buying like pieces of art in the real world or real estate. So they're using that basically to track off-chain investments. Now that's like, kind of a lot of the operational, I guess, efficiency gains of Syndicate versus traditional infrastructure, because how would you do that today? Well, when I was at a VC firm, like what we did was we literally had to manually input this into like a spreadsheet and then track it alongside the wallet on Etherscan. It just kind of is merging the two. So that's like kind of a simple improvement. But I think what a lot of the partners that we're working with are doing is like, yes, they're doing that, but what we're developing with them and incubating with them are some of these next gen capabilities that enable their VC fund, for example, to do things that are not easily possible in the fintech world. So a good example is like, what does a DAO do? Well, it actually like enables you to create these things very quickly. You can actually delegate, for example, decision making across any number of people, right? You can start to nest them in interesting ways because syndicates are composable with each other as well. And so a lot of the, VCs that we're partnered up with that are helping us incubate these future capabilities are using some of those, new to world characteristics of DAOs, right? Whether it's to sort of, for example, create Web3 versions of scout networks, for example. Some of them are actually looking to engage broader communities in making investment decisions or proposals. So we are going to start, we're already building a lot of that. And over time, you're going to start to see these things roll out and become, start to change kind of the landscape in interesting ways.
It would be cool, like if the VC then, for example, can tokenize, the DAO. I'm not sure if that is actually what is happening at the moment already. If 100 people invest jointly together, everybody owns 100. Like, are there 100 tokens, and I own one of the 100 tokens if I'm one of the investors? But if not, that would be great. That you can then maybe distribute tokens and basically co-ownership of, the VC or of the carry. As a percentage to hand out to venture partners or to operators, right? That help with the operation of running this VC fund. Yeah, that's cool.
Those are some of the things that are exactly being done. Now, as mentioned, right, there's a lot of compliance implications associated with being able to do that.
Yeah.
But yes, we have groups like South Park Commons, a big kind of like builder community, founder community, and a number of others that are doing things like what you just said, which is, very difficult in the traditional world.
I mean, finally, as we're getting to the end, I could talk about this for hours, but it's it's a big nut you're cracking here. I mean, it's like you're saying, right? It's so complex. I wonder, like, what's your kind of mental model or framework that helps you, with all the things that you, I guess, could be working on simultaneously, to just, keep focused and plan step by step on how to tackle and untangle this super complex problem that you're trying to solve here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a daily issue, I would say. But there are some things that I think have helped us a lot. One is that my co-founder and I, and everyone who has subsequently joined this company, we are here to do something really big and do it right over however long it takes. So we know that like this is going to take a long time, and so there's no rush, I think, to like try and jump too far into the future if the present day is not ready for it, right? With that said, though, like we want to, we're very intentional, and I guess like sequential in terms of like how we think both Syndicate but also the broader kind of landscape and industry will go from where we are today to where we believe and have high conviction it's going to go into the future. And a lot of that conviction was actually built over the last 4 years since my co-founder and I, Will and I started working on this together in 2018. Syndicate was not just kind of like this idea that was popular. Even when we were starting to talk to people about this in mid 2020, people were like, I don't understand why you're working on DAOs, much less invest in DAOs. Like that's not a thing. It's all about NFTs or other things right now. And so that didn't stop us. I mean, even in 2018 when we started researching it, which was like the last major bear market, we've been we have a pretty clear vision for where we're going, and so we're just executing against that. I mean, that's been really honestly like helpful for us and our team, just to like try and minimize the amount of shiny objects or thrash or FOMO that gets inherently created in any cycle, or especially this space. 1 week it's like this is the hottest thing, next week it's a different hottest thing. Like we've just been kind of building against our plan very steadily, and we'll continue to do that. So that's helped us a lot.
Ian, thank you so much for joining and giving us some insights into what you're building here, and best of luck for the future.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.